Well, well, here we are, unfortunately. It came to this, and we've warned about this for the past since this EU retained law bill came into being, pushed out by Jacob Rees-Mogg as the answer, the true Brexit freedom bill. Even Boris Johnson and other Brexiteers were tweeting out yesterday their fantastic support of this new Brexit opportunities bill, because that is what it is all of a sudden become. Being unable to find any Brexit opportunities themselves, they have now created what, quite frankly, I think will go down in history as the single worst bill to ever pass through Parliament. And I'm not going to lie, it's got some pretty stiff competition out there. There have been certainly other bills in the past that I think have been worse. So let's give it an even more better qualifier. Let's say the worst bill passed in modern history or even recent history. But I think historians are going to look back from a parliamentary perspective, from a constitutional perspective, from any way you can look at this bill is not going to end well. It is going to be bad. From start to finish, the Brexiteers and the Conservative Party has been warned time and time again just how reckless and stupid and ultimately the consequences of what this bill are going to be. So before we do get into sort of more of this, unfortunately, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And like I say, if you are new to the channel, the subscribe button. And of course, do ring the bell as well, so you get notifications of when we do a new video or when we go live, particularly when we're doing our good morning walks or when I just, the fancy takes me, as they say. Also, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, my one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's the one-off donation link as well from YouTube called the thank you button. That's down below as well. And of course, the Pony Club as well. And do remember, if you are subscribed to the Pony Club or the Patreon, you do have a weekly video that I make specifically just for you guys. And like I say, there is quite a bit of content building up in that library at the moment. So, how on earth, I don't understand how this has been allowed to happen, because this is sort of passed through, or so say passing through, shall we say, its final stages in the Commons, and it's set to go off to the House of Lords. And once again, we are here where we are looking at the House of Lords, which, if you know my channel, I don't have a very high opinion of the House of Lords, but I'll tell you what, when it's come to discussing things like Brexit and certainly the consequences of Brexit, I've been very, very glad we have had them. Because this bill is the most reckless and desperate move from the Brexit headbangers we have ever seen. There is no doubt this is what it is. It is desperate and it is reckless, because they know full well that there is going to be a general election within the next 2 years. I think there is still going to be a general election this year. I think that is absolutely on the cards. Very, very likely. But even if there isn't one this year, they know they've got 2 years. They know they have no time to waste, and they do not want any bridges left. So this entire bill is essentially a scorched earth campaign to try and get rid of as many EU laws in such a reckless way as possible. And what is worse is that we have just come off Liz Truss as Prime Minister, someone who acted in a completely irresponsible way. Remember, during the whole Truss Sunak leadership contest, Sunak advertised himself as the safe pair of hands. He was the competent one compared to Truss's recklessness, which ultimately, in that process, he was proven to be right, that he was certainly, or at least he certainly put himself forward as the far more competent one. But how can someone who sold themselves as being the competent prime minister compared to the chaos of Liz Truss be intent in not only putting forward this bill, but fast tracking the most incredibly ill conceived bill with deeply disregard for any of its consequences, just to appease a few people who have been constantly, and which underline this, they have been constantly wrong about all their ideas and all their all their protestations and proclamations about Brexit they have ever made have been wrong. And this goes right back to the very beginning. Just look at the EU UK trade agreement. They did everything they could to make it as thin as possible because they are laboring on this delusion that if there's any form left, that will end up back in the EU. But you know what is actually happening? You know what is actually really doing? They are destroying their own project. They are becoming their own kamikaze. This bill is it. This is their plane. They are strapping themselves in and they are ready for takeoff. Because I have said before, they and the Conservatives are not prepared for the consequences this bill is going to do. Because not only does this bill cover things like cybersecurity, workers' rights, environmental protections, even intellectual property rights. And bear in mind, Jacob Rees-Mogg, when he introduced this bill initially, said that this would only affect about 2,000 laws. Meanwhile, we found out later there was an extra 2,000 laws were added, bringing the total up to over 4,000. And there are other people and experts out there who say that number is significantly higher. This is the danger. Because people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who introduced this bill, who said, we'll introduce this bill, it'll be easy. No, this is not easy. Leaving the EU and disentangling ourselves from 40 years of laws and integration actions was never going to be easy. And this bill just shows how reckless their approach is to all this. All this approach these hardline Brexiteers have taken has resulted in a loss of trade, a loss of investment, and a massive hit to tax revenues, estimated at an annual 40 billion pounds, meaning that all those recent austerity measures that Jeremy Hunt had to do, well, that awfully sounds very familiar to the massive tax black hole that he had to start mysteriously filling in. Where did this tax hole come from, I wonder? And remember, the cold hard fact is that these hard Brexiteers refuse to admit is that the UK is the only major economy not to return to its pre-pandemic size. And that is because of the colossal act of self-harm that Brexit and these hardcore Brexiteers zealots have inflicted upon the UK. And unfortunately, this new bill is just going to inflict even more damage. Even more. And all this is being done by Rishi Sunak to try and appease people who have been constantly wrong time and time again about Brexit. He is a weak prime minister. He cannot move against them for whatever reason, and he's trying to appease them. And what has history shown us? You cannot appease Brexiteers because Brexit is just never enough for them. And even then, the whole ideas of taking back control, this bill gives forth what has been dubbed Henry VIII powers, so that Parliament has no scrutiny over any of these regulations that could be removed. Instead, any MP that may want to try and challenge any of these regulations being moved would be essentially like a minotaur getting lost in his own labyrinth. That is the type of insane countermeasures they are trying to deploy within this bill to stop anyone against, even daring to challenge them against removing some of this regulation. That is how dangerous they perceive any challenge, that they have made it so difficult to do. And yet, this bill goes on. And unfortunately, we are left with praying and hoping that the House of Lords just does what it can to at least either stop this bill or slow its passage down to such a crawl that the Labour government gets in and just completely puts this bill to bed once and for all. That is our only hope. And it's a sad state that we are in. But it also just goes to show one of the things that we've always said is, unfortunately, the British public do not care about regulations. And I'll tell you this now. After the end of this year, in 2024, I think the British public are suddenly going to wake up to just how important regulations really are. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can all buy me coffee. There's a YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Pony Club down below as well. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.